welcome back to Tiger Dragon Storm's podcast, the Spiritual Awakening Show. Let's have a look at today's question and answer it. The question is this: Tiger, what makes you believe that enlightenment is an experience? For those listeners who are listening to the audio podcast, not the YouTube video podcast, the word believe is in all capital letters. So I can say enlightenment is an experience because either, my fellow expressions of consciousness, one experiences enlightenment or one is enlightenment. In the so-called enlightenment experience, what takes place is you somehow have this deep understanding that the person you believed you was or were, living a life, making decisions, that mind, you have this deep understanding that you've never ever been that. You've never been this person. So in seeing that you've never been this separate person, this thinker, this doer, this one living life, you then see that for you to know this, you must have experienced being a person to then have the understanding that you are not a person. Enlightenment only makes sense when you contrast it with the so-called mundane, everyday experience. Enlightenment is not a constant state, it's an experience. No one who you deem to be enlightened, of course the most obvious person you think of would be Buddha, would say, I am enlightened. It's very funny because, as I just said, in the enlightenment experience, you realize the one saying I, the one who believes it is thinking, in other words, thought itself, was never you. So to say I am enlightened doesn't mean anything. That expression, that belief passes through you because you realize that you are always that observer of the thoughts. You're not the thoughts themselves. The person is a collection of thoughts. You can have the same body, yet a different person, meaning a different collection of thoughts. As some people go into comas and wake up speaking a completely different language. That's a new personality right there. And there's nothing wrong with enlightenment being experienced. Some people want to hold on to this belief that, oh, when I get enlightened, I'll be enlightened and I'll be enlightened forever. Everything will change and I'll be a transformed being, an enlightened being. So I'll be above what I used to be. These type of notions. But again, in the enlightenment experience, and I can speak from experience, you realize it's actually your nature that you are realizing, your normal self, which just so happens to be the source of all things. So it's quite beautiful, but at the same time you realize it's always been that. So there was never a change. There's never a, aha, I got it now. There's the experience of getting it. But what is there to get if the source of all is infinite? Because the source of all is infinite, we can have infinite possibilities, such as forgetting we are the source, believing and living like we are separate beings, and then one day realizing, oh, I'm not the doer of thoughts, I'm not the doer of actions. I don't choose my thoughts, I don't choose my memories. And it's really clear to see that I don't choose my thoughts because I cannot stop thought. If I cannot stop thought, why should I suggest or believe or assert that I actually choose the thoughts in the first place? Thoughts just appear. if you can report on your enlightenment experience, then again, it's just proof that it was an experience. So any so-called enlightened person will definitely be able to talk to you about the so-called moment that it happened, that they went from not understanding the truth of themselves to understanding. Again, it just shows, quite frankly, that it's an experience. That's why you can talk about it. It was an event in time. Of course, on a deeper level, we understand that time is not an actual force, but we have the experience of time. And the enlightenment event, you can actually see that it's a non-event because you're actually realizing what has always been apparent. But of course, we have to use words. I'm just saying that for the more advanced listeners who are trying to pick up on that. So yes, there's nothing to believe about enlightenment being an experience. Everything is an experience. Absolutely everything is an experience. Now, what one has to do on a spiritual path is try to find the experiencer. Can you find the experiencer? Either you believe you are the experiencer or you clearly see that there is no experiencer. But that's part of the journey. I might be able to say, and other people, that I see clearly that there is no experiencer, like a separate self experiencing the world through these eyes. But for another person, that might sound like belief because they haven't experienced it yet, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, you're either an experiencer, so you experience different states, different moments of time, or you're not an experiencer because you truly see that there is no experiencer, and then there is no question about whether one believes enlightenment is an experience, because you would see clearly that the experience itself, you could say, is like a dream. The same way it really seems like you are thinking your own thoughts inside the dream, and there are other people with their own thoughts inside the dream, and you wake up and realize it's just one mind. So it seems like there was experiencing, but it wasn't really. It's like now it seems like there's experiencing, but there isn't really. As in separate people experiencing. Because actually we are all the same source, but expressions of it. I mean, the word exist itself means to stand out from. How can one stand out from reality? There was just reality. This one reality, and we are all made of that, or one universe, we are all made of that. And if you say multiverse, by the way, the whole multiverse would have to exist within something to contain the multiverses, and that something you would easily say would be space. Just throwing that in there, because if you can count two, then you must be the observer of two. So if there's two universes, there must be an observer of the two universes. Again, just throwing that in there. So yes, enlightenment is indeed an experience, and it comes down to the expression of consciousness that you are to see whether there is an experiencer of experience or if there is no experiencer. But talking with everyday speech, yes, enlightenment is an experience because it's something that happens and you can talk about it. The Buddha was once, he could say he was once a prince, and then he became Mr. No Self. So enlightenment is an experience because he can talk about the fact that there is no self. You can only talk about that which you've experienced. Just as we cannot talk about the actual source of all of this that we call reality. Because every word we say, every thought we apparently think, these are all taking place within that. We are in the ocean of that. So we cannot talk about it. Every word we say, as I just said, is the experience. So you can never get back to find the experiencer, because everything you do and say is the experience. So the experiencer, by definition, would have to be distinct from the experience. Just as you watch a film, you're not in the film screen, that is. To truly embody enlightenment is to really understand that the so-called dualistic world is also that oneness. It just seems to be dual. That's the whole point. It seems as though, but there's always this safe hatch in knowing that we are that source of all which is infinite, quite frankly. A body is not infinite, a thought is not infinite, but the source in which the body is appearing within, reality itself is appearing within, that is infinite. You may say, but how do you know, Tiger? Well, I ask you, have you experienced non-experience? You may say, well, I haven't experienced before my birth, but I'll answer that in another video, because if you are consciousness and consciousness exists before the body, then you also existed before the body. As an expression of that consciousness, yes, that expression would have a birth, but consciousness itself, it does not need bodies. You cannot find consciousness in a body. We always assume it's in a body, but actually, can we find it in a body? Of course not, because it's non-dimensional. The sooner we come to appreciate that, the sooner we come to have way more peace and understanding in our lives, that we are not stuck inside the body. And this is one of the reasons so many people, and I've been there myself, feel like the body is not the rightful body, or that earth is not the rightful home. It's because you believe you are dimensional, but you are non-dimensional, just as consciousness is non-dimensional, because you are that consciousness. You are non-dimensional. You are non-dimensional. You are non-dimensional. Do not limit yourself. When you truly understand this, then you can play within the limits, understanding that essentially you are limitless. Because to experience anything, we have to act or live as a limited being. We have to. So we can have that sense of separation to interact with a world. So it's necessary. But we can get trapped if we forget or don't know that we are that pure non-dimensional source of the mind. So I'll try and wrap this up now. What makes you believe that enlightenment is an experience? As I've said, everything is an experience. It then comes down to the individual to see if that is true, that everything is an experience, or meaning there is an experiencer, or if there is no experiencer. Either way, you can see it's not a belief that enlightenment is an experience. As soon as we are able to talk about enlightenment, we are talking about an experience. As soon as we're able to talk about being holy and good and moral, we're talking about an experience. So and I can go even further and say, well, who is the one that believes? Can you find that one? I'm not suggesting there is a believer, because there is no separate I. Wow. This went from 0 to 100. I hope this helps some of you. If that went too fast, just rewind the podcast and have a nice listen again. And if you have any questions you'd like answered, please comment the questions. You can even email me at tigerdragonstonepodcast with a S at gmail.com. I prefer if you comment on my YouTube video, but if you can't, you can email. And yes, I hope that answers your question, and I hope if you're listening, you got some value bombs, let's say, from this. And have a wonderful day or evening. Thank you. Thank you for listening or watching this episode. If you are listening to it on my podcast, please follow. If you're watching this podcast on
YouTube, please subscribe and you'll stay up to date with the latest answers to the many interesting questions that the spiritual world has to offer. See you in the next one.